Okay, so today is Fodor's Meaning in the World. What is it called? Meaning in the World. Meaning in the World Order. Yes, that's what it's called. Yes. Okay. So the projector will be starting up. We'll have slides in a couple of seconds. But the problems with Dretschke that were coming up last time were, first of all, with this notion of function. I guess many of you were unhappy with Dretschke's way of talking about functions. Is that fair? I mean, the trajectory so far has been, we started out with causal theories for proper names and words for natural kinds. And then in Putnam's Brains in a Vat paper, you can see that he's generalizing the causal theory to absolutely everything, or at any rate, he doesn't put any restrictions on it. And then in Dretschke is being pressed a bit further to try and give a fully naturalist account of meaning, explaining where the existence of standards of rightness and wrongness comes from. And Dretschke's idea was we have this notion of a signed function depending on purposes and intentions, but there's also this notion of a natural function, something that answers a biological need of the organism. That's all right so far? Yep. And the standards of right or wrong for language come from this notion of function. And I guess is this a way to put the issue that a lot of you guys were raising, is you can't, if you can help yourself to the notion of function, that's all right. You can talk about standards of right or wrong. If you say the function of the heart is to pump blood, then if the heart doesn't pump blood, then it's going wrong. And if you say the function of this sign is to indicate the presence of fire, then if it's fulfilling that function, then it's getting it right when that's getting it right when there's a fire there. And it's not fulfilling that function if it goes off without a fire. So that would be getting it wrong, saying something false. Yeah, if you can just help yourself to the notion of function. But you guys were saying, well, no, you need to explain the notion of function in you need to define it in naturalistic terms. If you can't define it in naturalistic terms, then it wouldn't help Dretschke's project, right? Because you wouldn't have talk about right and wrong to its ultimate source. But there really is a problem here, because suppose you do define the notion of function in naturalistic terms, right? You just talk about some particular pattern of causes and effects in the biological population. And you say when you have that kind of thing, then you've got a function. Right, you can try to do that. People do try to do that. But then right and wrong wouldn't be showing up over here, right? Just a pattern of causal connections. Yeah? That's what it would be to be successfully naturalizing it, right? But if you've got no right or wrong, ultimately in your talk about functions, then you can't explain how right and wrong are getting into the picture by talking about functions. And how did it happen if you started out with no right or wrong, that you suddenly got right or wrong into the picture? And on the other hand, if you say, well, no, you can't do this kind of definition, the notion of function just involves right or wrong and you can't define it, then you haven't traced the talk of right or wrong to its ultimate source. You just help yourself to the notion of right or wrong. Yeah, so there's really a basic problem here. Is that right? Am I getting? You see what the problem? I mean, I'm trying to play back to you the problem that some of you were raising. Is that okay? The other problem was that even if you do have a kind of normativity over here of biological function, it's not the right kind of normativity. It can be, that was the point of talking about these positive illusions. It can be biologically beneficial to get things wrong, to think that you're more popular than you are, that you're more in control than you are, that life is better than it is, all that kind of stuff. Yeah? So it's kind of sad, but at this point we wave goodbye to Dretschke. Okay? No one, no one was really caught by Dretske and wishes to stick up for him at this point. Melissa? No? Okay. Okay, you don't have to. Right. Okay, so Fodor is trying something different, and he starts out with a much more abstract statement. Everything in Fodor is brutally abstract and schematic, and I think this is what's so good about it. The text itself is awful. How many of you have tried to look at it, the Fodor text? Did you find it an enjoyable read? I think it's absolutely barbaric. It's a single exception in this class. I think every other text we look at is really wonderful stuff to read. You may agree or disagree, but that's what I think. Everything else we look at is beautifully written. In the Fodor, it's a very important idea, this, but the writing is just gratuitously complicated and technical and so on. He didn't need, it didn't need to be such a torment to read. Anyway, okay, so let's start out with this disjunction problem. So the general project is we're trying to find standards of right or wrong for sentences. These exist in virtue of, and then we're going to put in some blank from the natural sciences. Right? That's naturalism. Yeah? Okay. So what we want is something like, we want to define reference. If we can define reference, then we're on the way, because truth is connected to reference. And then we can say, X is, but we know there's something like a causal theory must be right. Right, class? Yes? Melissa?
Sorry, just one quick thing.
Yeah, sure.
When you say standards of right and wrong for sentences, that's broadly speaking the same as truth and falsity.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. It's entirely the same as truth and falsity. Yeah. Maybe I should have said truth and falsity. Yeah. Okay. Oops. Okay, so we think that reference is a causal notion. So that and cause is part of the natural sciences. The natural sciences talk about causes. So we can talk about signs referring to objects in virtue of the fact that the use of the sign is typically caused by the object. Okay? What about that? That's all right? That seems like a reasonable place to start. And then there's this basic disjunction problem. This is a more abstract version, I think, of Dretske's problem about misrepresentation. You can have it that the object's x's cause the use of the sign x. But if you're capable of making mistakes, then it must be able to happen sometime that things that aren't x's, namely y's, can also cause the use of the sign x. Right? That's just to say you can sometimes make mistakes. You're caused to use the sign by something other than what the sign refers to. But if both x's and y's cause the sign to be produced, what right do we have to say that the sign is referring only to xness and not to yness? I mean, they both cause x to be produced. Cause is what makes it refer to the thing. So why should we single out just one of them as what the sign refers to? The general thing we'd have to do here if we want to make progress is distinguish causes of the production of the sign that are fixing the reference of the sign and causes of the production of the sign that we don't care about. Right? That don't fix the reference. And that's the disjunction problem. We've got to draw that distinction in naturalistic terms. Distinguish the causes of production of x that fix the references of x from the cause of production of x that fall outside the reference of x. And so there's something we want explained here. We want to understand why one kind of causation rather than the other should be the one that matters for reference fixing. Here's Fodor's example. It's kind of a schematic example. I see a cow which, stupidly, I misidentify. I take it to be a horse. So taking it causes me to say, horse. It's always nice to get an insight into the home lives of great philosophers. I think it helps if you imagine this is a very urban type who's kind of frightened by country matters. Yeah. Or I'm seeing, I'm seeing a cow, their real reaction is just to start back and say, horse! Right? Yeah. Okay, so cow causes a philosopher to say horse. But that's false, right? When he says horse, it is not a horse. Yeah. So we want it to be. Now, when you say horse, your utterance of the word means horse in virtue of the causal relation between horses and your use of the sign horse. Yeah? Stop me if I'm going too fast here. But on the other hand, we don't want it to be that my utterance of horse means cow in virtue of the causal relations between some productions of horse and cows. Yeah? But if the causal relations are the same, if horses make you use the sign and cows make you use the sign too, why is one set of causal relations fixing the reference of the sign and the other one not? Why are we classifying one set of uses of the sign as right and the other ones as wrong? If causation makes representation, how can the semantic connections between the sign horse and horses not be the same as the semantic connections between the sign horse and cows? Yeah. So putting it schematically, we've got both horses and cows causing the use of the sign horse, and yet the sign horse refers only to horses. It doesn't apply to cows. But why is that? Why could that be? That's a disjunction problem. Any thoughts? Yes? How is this different from what, sorry? How is it different from the H2O XYZ problem? I guess it's, well, let's take this slowly. The H2O XYZ problem is that on twin Earth, XYZ causes people there to say water, right? On Earth is water that causes people to say water, right? And there's no XYZ on Earth, and there's no H2O on twin Earth. Is that right? Okay. So far as that goes, all the uses of the sign water on Earth might be being caused by H2O. Yeah. So it would just unproblematically refer to H2O. Yeah. I mean to spell it out a bit further if you spell out a bit further what you wanted.
Oh, it's just I don't know. We have like two different topics that refer to the use of water. But I suppose in this case there are two different like it's like that English, not that English, like.
Yes, that's right. There are two different linguistic populations in the Earth to an Earth case. Yeah. Whereas here, it's just one linguistic population, and indeed maybe just one person that is using the same sign, causally responding to both kinds of target. Yeah. That's the difference. Yeah. So how do you solve it? Yes?
Maybe if we take on probabilistic causation,
Uh-huh.
we can say that one cause screens out the other.
It screens out the other, yeah?
It's like maybe horses, actual horses, make it more probable for me to have the token horse.
Right. I think this is great, but it needs a bit of development, because suppose I'm really a city boy, right? Then cows and horses both kind of frighten me. And then when I see a cow, that also makes it probable that I'm going to say horse. Yeah. So there might be not much difference in probability here. I mean, maybe when I say horse, maybe when I encounter a real horse, I always use the sign pretty tentatively. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe there's one particular cow that like really looks like a horse.
Yeah, maybe it would really look like a horse. Yeah, maybe it's disguised. Maybe it's the product of genetic modification, or yeah, disguised as a horse. Yeah. Yes.
It seems something like Campbell's idea of a concept that has to come from the object itself in the world, and its basic meaning is agreed upon in the community. So, the actual item in the world that's causing the name or the concept, which we agree, the name, would be eliminated in this error case because it wouldn't fit the community's agreement about what it means.
If the community's agreement means there's a definition, yeah, that's not the case we want. We're thinking here of horse as a simple term in Russell's sense. You see what I mean? So that the only thing fixing its meaning is the causal chain. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Is this supposed to avoid a sort of Evans type answer where we say that, like the case we're
The
imagining
dominant
of
source,
the,
yeah.
of the true city boy, that
Yeah.
there is no dominant source for him, no dominant causal source of him using the token horse. That like it could, like
Yeah.
presented by a horse or a cow, just the shock produces horse in him. So neither like the actual horse.
Yes.
But okay.
I think that's very good. That's maybe connected to the earlier suggestion that maybe if the vast majority of the tokenings of a horse are caused by horses, and it's only a kind of small minority, or whatever dominant means exactly, the important ones are caused by horses, and it's only a kind of marginal set that are caused by cows. Yeah. I agree. The trouble is if you just do it in terms of numbers, yeah. Suppose there's only a handful of white horses in the world, yeah. Then the number of white horses that cause the production of the sign horse will be pretty small, yeah, because there aren't very many of them. So you don't want it to come out that white horses aren't horses just because there's not very many of them. You see what I mean? So then you say, well, that's not what I mean. That's not what I meant by dominant. I didn't mean it just numbers. But then there's just more spelling out to do. Yeah, yeah. But I really sympathise. Yeah. Yep.
I'm just a little confused. It's not the case that he's heard these words before and has like a general sense as to what they apply to, or is he just seeing a creature he's never seen before and it makes him say words?
No, I guess he understands English. I mean, he's an English speaker. Yeah, yeah, and these words are in his vocabulary. It's just that, I mean, this is such a schematic example. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to take it seriously, but there must be examples like that, if you see what I mean, because we do make mistakes. Yeah, and we can systematically make mistakes. There are illusions. Yeah. As Melissa was saying, you just have to imagine horse lookalikes. Yeah. Anywhere where you can have lookalikes, you can have this kind of case. Yeah? Yeah. Even though this is so baldly and schematically described. I mean, it's just one step away from having X's and Y's. You see what I mean? Yeah. Is that it? No one else has a solution? Yeah?
Could it be that horses faces reference of saying the word horse because cows can produce, can have this other different words, or?
Yeah, because we have a rival to horse for cows. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And we have a rival term
Yeah.
that really does apply to cows.
Well, I guess I was thinking of it as horses is the more concise production of saying the word horse, whereas cows can have this, say cows, or say, I don't know, a farm animal, horses. The production of the words for us, for the word for the animal cow, can vary as opposed to horses. We're always referencing
Again, I think that's an important line of thought, that it might be that what makes this look so difficult is you're just looking at one word, whereas usually words have meaning as part of a family. You see what I mean? Like, if you think of the words for the colours, you don't really know what orange is unless you know it's bounded by red and yellow. You see what I mean? The orange gets its meaning in part from the contrast with red and yellow. Yeah. So you could say horse gets its meaning in part from the contrast with other animals because it's part of a larger vocabulary. Straight off, though, I mean, it's not obvious that horse and cow exclude one another. I mean, it could happen, you know, that someone ignorant of the country might say, horse, is that a kind of cow? You see what I mean? You don't. I don't know. You know, maybe they are. Yeah. Yes.
Seems like the problem arises because from a failure of perception.
Yes, very good.
So it's like a perceiver subjective error that can't be.
Yes.
It seems like there's not a real problem here. It's just a problem in the head.
There's not a real problem here. It's just a problem in the head. I sympathise with that. It must have something to do with the mechanisms of error. Yeah. But if the mechanisms of error can cause the production of the sign horse, and our only fix in meaning is through the idea of causation, then why doesn't that cause count? Yeah. In fixing the reference, yeah. Why is that classified as error? That's the puzzle. Yeah. Well, okay. Let me just try and say what I think Fodor's solution is. Okay, so our problem is to explain what's different about the causation in the left from the causation in the right. And here's one way of putting Fodor's idea. Suppose that horses didn't anymore cause the word horse to be produced. Think about that. Then would cows cause the production of the word horse? Well, it says it. You see the intended answer on the board. But the idea is, suppose that the word horse went into disuse. Yeah, cows only get called horses because they are horse lookalikes. Yeah, so we stopped calling the horses horses. We wouldn't be taken in by the lookalikes anymore, because we're not classifying things as horses anymore anyway. Yeah, so it wouldn't matter that they were lookalikes of horses. Yeah, so if we weren't calling the horses horses, then we wouldn't call the cows horses either. Yep. So if horses didn't cause the word horse to be produced, then cows wouldn't cause the word horse to be produced. They're only coming in by courtesy as lookalikes. They're only coming in on the backs of the horses, if you see what I mean. Yep. Okay. But suppose we got better at discriminating horse lookalikes from horses. Suppose you took Fodor aside and said, no, look, this is what a cow looks like. This is what a horse looks like. You give him some training. He'd still be using the word horse to classify horses. Yeah? So horses would actually still be causing him to use the word horse. But would cows be causing him to use the word horse? No, because we trained him out of it. Yep. I'm sorry, there's such a racket going on outside. Can you do that louder? It's a simple name, that's right. Okay, well, I guess the idea is that if I just say, look, I show you pictures or something here. Lo, here is the horse and here is the cow. Look, they are quite different, man. Come on. Then I don't need to be giving him a definition. I'm just showing him and retraining him. No. I mean, what would the definition look like? I'm just retraining his perceptual discriminatory skills.
Part of what's bothering me is that horse and cow seem to be simple names in the category. It kind of does that definition of horse is something that can mate with a horse.
A horse is, yeah. A horse is something that can mate with a horse. It's very hard to give the actual definition. Yeah, I mean, there are two things here. For present purposes, we're assuming that the simple names that cows and horse are simple terms. Yeah. But I'm happy independently to have the argument that you can't actually define these. I think it's very difficult to actually give the definition. There really is no straightforward definition. Melissa? Yeah.
I don't know, that seems like a really good point. I mean, you wouldn't want to have to rely on other speakers to do the relevant kind of training to make people better, to make the antecedent there true.
Yeah.
Even if cows didn't cause horses to reproduce, because then it seems like you're presupposing.
Somebody else can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe you could cash out the idea that you became better at discrimination, not in those terms. Like if you just turned up the lights or like moved the animal closer to the
Yeah,
side
yeah.
or something like that, then maybe like sort of their own accord, they would stop using the symbol.
Yeah, stop rushing into speech. Listen to what kind of noise it makes.
Yeah.
Right? Every child knows what noises horses and cows make, right? So maybe you just hold off, right?
Yeah, but it does seem
Just
to me
use
like
that thing.
you have to do it that way.
Yeah.
You have to make it sort of non-circular, so that you're not just piggybacking on someone else's understanding.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. Yeah. Yep. Sorry, can
Something similar to that.
namely? Okay. Okay. Again, if you take light blue and dark blue, yeah, you might get better at discriminating light blue from dark blue just by looking more carefully at the thing, but you have no hope, evidently, of giving a definition of light blue or dark blue. Yeah, you can't always take these perceptual things. Okay, so let's see. The idea is if you took the horse connection away, you still have the cows. You'd also take away the cows-horse connection, right? But if you could take away the cows-horse connection, leaving intact the horses-horse connection. Yeah? So Fodor says the causal connection between cows and horse and the sign horse is asymmetrically dependent on the causal connection between horses and horse, right? So in that, if you the arrow on the right depends for its existence on the arrow on the left, but the arrow on the left does not depend for its existence on the arrow on the right. Yep. So there's a dependence here, but it's not symmetric. One depends on the other, but the other doesn't depend on it. The causal connection between cows and the word horse is asymmetrically dependent on the causal connection between horses and the word horse. Yep.
Okay, so just to be clear, the thought is that to call anything a horse at all, we have to have actual horses in the first place?
That's right.
And so
And be causally connected to them.
Okay.
Yeah. So that gives you a difference between these two arrows. So now you can say, if you've got an asymmetric dependence between these two causal connections, then the dependent connection, the dependent causation, is the one that's causing the mistakes. Well, there you go. What more do you want? The causal connection between cows and the word horse is asymmetrically dependent on the causal connection between horses and horse. A way of thinking of it is there's a mechanism that causes you to use this sign in response to the stuff out there. And when the cows come in, they are exploiting that mechanism. But you could fine-tune that mechanism in the way Melissa was indicating, just take more care, look more carefully before rushing to judgment. Keep that mechanism intact. But to blow up the connection between horses and the word horse, you'd have to remove the mechanism altogether. So we could also put it in terms of possible worlds. In the nearest worlds in which horses don't cause the use of the word horse, cows don't cause the use of the word horse. Right? So consider these worlds in which we've stopped using our horse detecting mechanisms to cause a production of a bit of language. Then in those worlds, cows won't be causing us to use the word horse either. But in the nearest worlds in which we're better at differentiating the cows from the horses. Cows won't be causing us to use the word horse, but horses will still be causing us to use the word horse. Well, there you go. We've got a problem and we solved it. Who says there isn't progress in philosophy? Right? Isn't that beautiful? I mean, it's really stark. He hasn't talked about intentions. He hasn't talked about functions. I mean, I understand that it seems kind of sterile, this very schematic example, but the beauty of it is in its brutal simplicity and austerity. Yeah, that's why it's an important theory. He seems to be doing this thing, explaining the existence of a distinction between right and wrong, entirely in terms of these very simple causal connections. Yeah, I mean, you can see just how the machine is meant to be working here. So it's a great idea. As I say, his exposition is lamentable, in my view, but the idea is terrific. Yep. Are you comfortable with that? You see how it's meant to work? Let's just do a quick workout. Suppose you've got a sign that really does stand for being either a horse or a cow. Yep. We're going to say D. You can say D. You can say, "Lo, D," if you've got a horse in front of you or you've got a cow in front of you. And either way, it's going to be right. Yeah. So that's different to the ordinary word horse, right? So then, suppose that people didn't say D anymore. Suppose that horses, what I mean is, suppose that horses didn't cause you to use D anymore. Then that could only be because the meaning of the sign had changed. So cows wouldn't cause you to produce D anymore. Yeah? If you just threw away the old basis on which you use D, then that, if horses wouldn't be causing you to produce D, then cows wouldn't be causing you to produce D either. So you've got a dependence of the cow D. Wait a minute, which way around am I putting this? If you didn't have the horse D connection, then you wouldn't have the cow D connection. So the cow D connection is depending on the horse D connection. Yes? Have I put that out the right way? Yes? Okay. Yes? Oh, it could, but there's no particular reason to suppose that would be so. Yeah? I'm not saying it couldn't possibly happen. I'm just saying if that happened, then there's no reason why that should happen either. Yeah? So what takes away the one connection would take away the other connection. And if you think of it round the other way, if cows didn't cause you to produce the sign D anymore, then horses wouldn't cause you to produce the sign D anymore. Yep. So I said that the cow D connection depends on the horse D connection, but now the horse D connection also depends on the cow D connection. Yeah? This is meant to be very elementary. So just pause me if that doesn't make sense. Yep.
Can I try it with a different example?
Yes, good, yes.
So maybe like I use the word duck.
Duck, yes. To mean either a duck or a goose. Yes.
No.
No.
Like male duck or female duck.
Yeah, okay, very good.
We
Yeah.
apply duck to either.
Excellent, that's a better example. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I guess so you could go like this. Okay, why does duck mean all ducks and not
Yeah.
just male duck or female
Yeah.
duck? Something narrower. Then you can say if female ducks didn't produce duck anymore, that would only be because duck
Didn't mean the
didn't
same.
duck anymore. Didn't mean the same thing
Right.
anymore.
Yeah. So,
And then male ducks wouldn't produce duck anymore either.
yep, excellent. Yeah. Does what she's saying make sense? Please pause me if not. I mean, just shake your head vigorously and say, I don't get that.
Because it does seem right. I mean, if male ducks and female ducks look a lot alike,
Yeah.
then if female ducks didn't cause duck anymore, it must be, I guess that's the intuition, it's because duck doesn't mean duck anymore.
Right. I mean, that's a good example because many of us couldn't tell the difference. Well, I don't think I could tell the difference between a male duck and a female duck. It's just the same thing that's making me, they're lookalikes of each other. Yeah. So it's just the same thing that's making me say female duck as male duck. I mean, so whether it's male or female, it's just the same thing about it that's making me say duck. Yeah. So if the female ducks, if it stopped working with the female ducks, then it would stop working with the male ducks too. And if it stopped working with the male ducks, it would stop working with the female ducks. Yeah? So these two causal connections are symmetrically dependent on one another. Each depends on the other. So if D stands for being a horse or a cow, then horses cause D, cows cause D, and these two are symmetrically dependent. Yeah? You'll see the point of this exercise in just a minute, I hope. Okay, now suppose you've got a different case. Suppose D is actually ambiguous. It's got two different meanings. Sometimes it means horse, sometimes it means cow. Then if these are two independent meanings that the sign has, then if horses stopped causing the use of the word horse, would cows still cause the use of the word horse? Yes, because they're just two independent meanings that the sign has, and the mere fact that it's lost one wouldn't mean that it had lost the other. And the same holds round the other way. If cows stopped causing the use of the word horse, then horses would still cause the use of the word horse. So there you've got symmetric independence. Yeah. Each of these causal connections is independent of the other. Yep.
Do you mean horses, horse D, and cows, horse D, or that horse?
Blast it. Yes, that is what I mean. Not for the first time in this class. Okay. Yes, okay. All right, thank you. Right. And then those two causal connections are symmetrically independent. That's all right? Is that better? No, did I put it like that? Okay. Okay, so if you've got an asymmetric dependence, if horses cause the use of a sign X and cows cause the use of a sign X, then if you've got an asymmetric dependence, then these are not symmetrically independent. So it's not that you have two different meanings for the sign X here. And you know that it doesn't mean either X or Y because you don't have a symmetric dependence. Therefore, you know it doesn't mean horse or cow. You know it doesn't mean, it doesn't have two meanings. So it's got to be that the dependent causation is the causation of mistakes. There's no way the dependent causation can be correct. Dependent causation is causation of mistakes. Asymmetrically dependent causation is causation of mistakes. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, it's bleak, but it's beautiful. I mean, the intention is wonderful. Yeah, to really explain all these phenomena of meaning at root in terms of this. So, is this really naturalistic? Well, I think actually that problem that Gretschke had also comes up here. And I think when you start to see what the problem is for Fodor, it starts to look as if the whole idea of naturalism is just a mistake. And the great thing about Fodor is it's put so simply and bleakly that you see with great clarity why the whole thing is completely hopeless. It seems to me, I mean, right from the start of the class, I've been explaining why this seems like a real problem, and it does seem like it is a real problem. But I think in the way it's stated, it just can't be soluble. Because look, what we're thinking is, I mean, the way I've been putting it is, given the meaning of the word horse, if horses didn't cause the word horse to be produced, then cows would not cause the word horse to be produced, because the lookalikes are just exploiting our understanding of the term horse, right? That's how you understand that the dependence is asymmetric. Given the meaning of the word horse, if cows didn't cause the word horse to be produced, horses would still cause the word horse to be produced. So you could keep your understanding of the word horse intact, even if you weren't being fooled. But there I've just been freely talking about meaning and understanding. And we're supposed to be not talking about meaning and understanding. We want to be giving a truly reductionist, a truly naturalistic account. We're trying to explain how there can be standards of right or wrong for sentences without appealing to notions like meaning. So the intuitive way of understanding what I've been saying so far, the way of motivating this idea of an asymmetric dependence, is to say, well, if horse means horse and you know what's going on, then horses will cause production of your term horse. And anything you can't differentiate from a horse will cause production of your term horse, but you could improve your discrimination. That's the intuitive idea. But we're not allowed to say that if we're going to be naturalistic. You can't just appeal to talk about meaning and understanding. You can't say things like, if cows didn't cause the use of the word horse and we held constant the meaning of the word horse, or if horses didn't cause the use of the word horse and we held constant the meaning of the word horse. Well, which situations would we be talking about? And which nearby worlds? And someone earlier said, well, how do you know what would be happening if horses didn't cause the production of the word horse? And I think that's right. I mean, just to be told that, you don't know what's going on. Is everyone blind? Have all the horses been exterminated? What's going on? You don't know what's going on. The only reason we have a sense of what's going on is that we were using the notion of meaning. And then when you're using that notion of meaning, when you say, well, I'm talking about worlds in which it means just the same thing, we understand the sign in just the same way, but we improved our powers of discrimination, then of course it's correct to say that the dependent causation is the causation of mistakes. Because I described this as a world where I'm holding constant the meaning of the word, but I just improved my powers of discrimination. Yeah, that's where it seems so obviously correct to say what Fodor says. But then you're just thinking in terms of meaning and understanding. You're not working with a naturalistic definition. But suppose we actually manage it. Suppose that Fodor manages to give a naturalistic account of which possible worlds he has in mind when he says if this didn't happen, then that wouldn't happen. Then what would be going on here? You could then state in worlds in which, let's suppose, there's electromagnetic radiation GX, or there's electromagnetic, whatever exactly the naturalistic replacement is for that talk about meaning and understanding, you do something, right? When there are magical rays GX, although physical rays GX, right? Just something physical that's making the difference between these situations. Okay, so we can say in terms of those physical characteristics of the situation, just how cows cause the word horse, that causal connection depends on the causal connection between horses and the word horse. And we've stated it all in terms of some natural phenomena. So then you'd have a kind of mimicking of the dependence that you see in common sense psychology. That you'd have something that looked quite like the asymmetric dependence that holds in virtue of the facts about meaning and understanding. Yeah, it would be similar to the so long as we talk freely about meaning and understanding, we can see there's a kind of asymmetric dependence here, and that's connected to the existence of standards of right and wrong. Now we say, we've no idea how to do it, but let's try it. Let's try saying in purely naturalistic terms, in terms of some kind of physical forces, the conditions that we're talking about where you can see this asymmetric dependence. The trouble is, how could that explain the existence of standards of rightness and wrongness? If you just say there's an asymmetric dependence here, there are a lot, out there in the natural world, there are going to be lots of causal connections that are asymmetrically dependent on one another without generating standards of rightness or wrongness. How could something that's just a facsimile explain how there really are standards of rightness or wrongness? If you really succeed in describing the situations you want here in purely physical or naturalistic terms, then you've just bleached out any talk of rightness or wrongness. And how could you possibly get it back in? You couldn't get it back in. If you're describing your facsimile in entirely naturalistic terms, then it's going to be obvious that that can't explain the existence of standards of rightness or wrongness. How could you get an ought from an is? Right? You're just describing how the world is. You're just describing something about the clockwork of the world. How could that generate truth and falsity? That is just as puzzling as ever it was. And the thing about Fodor's thing is it's close enough to being successful, it seems to me, that you suddenly see the impossibility of the whole exercise. You see, this couldn't do it. And if it doesn't explain the existence of standards and rightness and wrongness, well, we haven't explained what we set out to explain. So that whole project of explaining the existence of truth and falsity in naturalistic terms, which is very popular, in a big program to this day, it only seems promising because it's so difficult, and at any point you encounter so much complexity. But then with Fodor's thing, it's so simple. You can see just how it's meant to work, and you can see that nothing of that sort could possibly work. How could a particular structure in a network of causal relations mean that you had standards of right and wrong there? It couldn't. And on that bombshell, we'll pack up for today.